She ain't nothing but a no good diamond watching woman. Only love me cause she see Versace on my linens. Baby, I'm not God, so your sins are not forgiven. I can never lose, every day I wake up winning. Mama told me cut the bad hoes off with the scissors. Make them disappear.
Yo, what up my dudes, back again with another video in the Spigot series. For this episode we're going to continue my QuarterMaster plugin by adding the MongoDB database integration so that we can store data and then retrieve data and stuff like that for our locks and stuff. That's what we'll be doing primarily this episode, but we'll be doing some other stuff a little bit. But yeah, let's get started here. This is going to be the second time I've recorded this because, like I said last episode, I accidentally deleted the second part. So yeah, hopefully this goes well. So we've got the basic menu set up. We got a create new lock thing, so whenever they click the tone of undying, aka the yes button, it's going to create a new lock for the player, but we don't have any code that's going to create the lock. And let's think about how we want to do this, right? So whenever we create a lock, that means that we need to store the block's location somehow, because then we can retrieve that data whenever a player tries to open a chest, and we can see if that chest is locked or not, right? So we just need to store the location of the block, and then the player who owns the block, their UUID, and stuff like that. And we're going to be using MongoDB to be doing that. So I have my little database open here. Of course, it's the same one from last episode. So if we go to collections here, you can see that I have no databases or a collection set up because I deleted everything. So I'm just going to set up a new one here, start from fresh so you can see the process. And so we're going to call this QuarterMaster because it's for the QuarterMaster plugin. And then our collection name will be locks because we're going to be storing a bunch of lock data and locks and stuff like that. So that name fits perfectly, right? So currently we have no data in here, obviously, because we just created it. So what we need to do is connect to the database first before we can actually add stuff. So to connect to the database, we can find the Java driver, the documentation, and all that, so we can look up the code for how to do it. So yeah, here we go. We got connect to MongoDB. First, we need the Maven thing, so we can add the MongoDB library to our project here. So we need to go to installation, then go down here a little bit and copy this dependency. So now we can go back to our pom.xml and then put it right here. Of course, I already put mine here. I forgot to delete it, but you'll see something like this. So you just gotta do that, put it right there, just like that. So now it's gonna start importing the MongoDB library to your Java project for you automatically, which is pretty cool. So now that we've done that, we can start accessing the database. And then so we need to connect to the database first of all, or connect to our server first. So to do that, we need to actually, let's go back to our documentation here. We need to go to connect to MongoDB right here. Okay, cool. So and then we just find this right here, copy that, go back to this and paste it. Well, let's make a section connect to MongoDB server or database, and then we're gonna put that right there. And inside of here, we need to put the connection URL for our little server here. So we need to go back here to our atlas and go to overview, then click connect, and then choose this, select it to Java, and copy that code there. Okay, so now we can just go back here and paste it. So now I can put the password here, password !23. Of course, if you give anyone this URL here, then they can connect to your server, so be careful of that. Of course, I'm leaving this from last episode. I have the same username and password, so you could have basically got into my database if you wanted to. So thanks for not doing that. But anyway, now we want to connect to the database now that we connected to the client, the server itself. So to connect to the database, we go to databases and collections, select this here, and then paste this right here. Import that, and then you got to put in the database name, which is QuarterMaster, the one we just created a second ago. And then after that, we just have to connect to the collection, right? Because the collection is where the data is actually going to be stored. So that's going to be right down here. Boom. Right there. There we go. So import document from bson, okay? And then also import Mongo collection, of course. And then we just need to provide locks as the collection name. Perfect. So now that we have this, we can now use this object here to access our database. We can add documents to it, delete documents, everything we need to do basically. So now that we have that, we've successfully connected to our MongoDB database. So what I want to do now is basically create a new class within utils called LockUtils, which is going to be a class that's going to manage everything directly related to lock management. So that's going to range from creating new locks, deleting locks, editing locks. So yeah, this is just going to hold a bunch of methods for doing all that stuff. So since we're at the stage where we want to create a new lock for the player, we need to make a create new lock method inside of here, because we need to be able to create a new lock, obviously. So we're going to make it public static void create new lock. Okay, very simple. And we're going to provide a player p, which is going to be the owner of the block that we're creating, and then the block, so that we can later grab the XYZ coordinates of the block whenever we're storing it into the database. You'll see how that works in a second. Just import that. There we go. And inside of here now, we want to make a document which is going to represent the lock that we want to store into the database. So I'll just write this out. Document representing the new lock. So yeah, what we're going to be doing here is building upon what we learned last episode, which was, accessing the database and creating new locks and stuff like that. So yeah, we're basically solidifying what we learned last episode, or the episode before that, excuse me, on MongoDB, so that we can get better at it, I guess you could say. So anyway, we just need to create a document here. We're going to call this lock, by the way, and import that from JSON. It's equal to new document. And now inside of here, we need to think about what data we want to store in each lock that we create. Okay. So first, the most essential thing is going to be the UUID of the player, because we want to be able to identify which player owns a lock. And you might be wondering, why store UUID rather than the name of the player? And that's because if a player ever changes his name, the name of the player is going to change, and it's still going to have the old name of the player inside the database, right? So if you store the UUID, every player account has a permanent UUID that never changes. So if we store that, then we can get the player at any point without any issues. Okay, it's more of a security type thing, I guess you'd say. Not really security, but it's more solid than using a name. Okay, so to get the UUID, we want to do p to access the player object, .get unique ID, and then .toString. So we're going to be storing a string of the UUID of the player. And the reason we're storing a string rather than a actual UUID object is because MongoDB documents only store certain objects, like strings, integers, doubles, certain stuff like that. But it does not store other objects like UUID and stuff like that. It depends on what it can store. So we'll just convert it to string, and then whenever we need to access the UUID to convert it into a player object, we can convert it back from a string to a UUID object, really simply. And you'll see how to do that in a second, do not worry. So now let's think about what else we want to add. Let's store, okay, so in the future, like I said, there's going to be more locks that we want to store other than a chest, so we can allow players to lock doors, barrels, stuff like that, other types of blocks. So we're going to store the type of the thing that we're locking. So for now, we're just going to have it as chest for default, but later on, this is going to be different depending on what they lock, okay? And then now let's store, okay, we want to store the location of the block that they're locking, obviously, right? Because if we ever need to find out if a block is locked, we want to be able to provide the location, and then we can determine if it's locked or not. So let's think about how we want to do this. We could just do location, instead of location, we could just do x, and then do block.getX, right? But a better way to do that, since we need to store the x, y, z, all of those, is to actually just create a sub-object within this document object. So we're going to create a new document nested within this document itself. So the reason we're doing that is because since x, y, z are all related to one thing, we can basically group that into one object so that we can just access location at any time from this document. And it's like a grouping basically without using an array, because if we were to use an array of x, y, z values, you can't like access an array and do .get. You can only access an array with their indexes, right? So it's just better to use an object inside of this object itself. So yeah, inside of here, we just need to store the values like we did up here, basically. We're just nesting another document within this document itself. That's all we're doing. Don't get confused by that. So we want to do new document x is equal to block.getX. So we're storing the x values. And then we're going to do y. We're appending that, and we're adding the y. And then finally, we're going to add z, of course. .getZ, perfect. So now we're storing the XYZ values into this location object within the document, so we can add more stuff to this lock document right here. So we're gonna add one more thing. Let's call this creation-date, so that we can store whenever the lock was created if we ever need to retrieve that information. And we could just do new date, because like I said, document objects accept certain objects as their values, so we can use date objects too, which is pretty cool. So we're going to store the date that the document or the lock was created, and all we got to do is do new date, because if we do that, creating a new date is basically going to get the exact time currently, right? I show how to use the date object within one of my Java videos in the Java series in case you're interested. But yeah, now that we've done that, we just need to therefore access the collection. to put this document within the database. So we just do col, but as you can see here, we cannot access the collection because it's not, it's inside of here, right? So we can't access it, especially because it's in the scope of this method here. So what we can do here is basically cut this out, or no, copy it, I mean. So just put it here. Now let's get these two also, put these over here, get rid of this. There we go. And we're just not going to initialize them. We're going to leave them as defined, but not initialized. And then we just got to make these public, or actually we can make this one private and this one also private. But this one we're going to make, this one down here, we're going to make public because we want to access the collection in other classes, because we don't need to access these at any time. These are only useful to create the collection here. So then we can access the collection within, let's say, this class here, right? Because it's public. So we can do that now. Now we just need to go down here and get rid of these, since they're already initialized up here. So now we can get rid of the definition for it, basically, I guess you could say. So down here we're initializing it. So there we go. And a better way to do this actually would be to make this private static, and then just make a getter for this so that we can do get collection or something like that. So we're just going to do build, or no, code generate getter MongoDB collection. We're going to call this get collection, or get database collection. That's a better name. So therefore we can access QuarterMaster YouTube dot get database collection because it's a static method here. So we can go back here to LockUtils, and all we got to do now is do QuarterMaster YouTube, like I said, dot get database collection dot insert one, and then just provide block as a parameter, just like that. So now we can access the database collection within any of our classes because now it's a static method within the main class. Very simple. And if everything works correctly, what we want to do just for testing purposes is output new lock created, right? Like just like that. Okay. So perfect. If this method is able to work correctly, it should print out this into the console, and we know it works correctly. So just to recap what we did here, we're basically just creating a new class to hold all of our lock utilities, anything that's related to locks directly. And this first method here is going to be creating a new lock. We just provide a player in the block that we're trying to lock, and we're making a new document here. And this document is going to store the UUID of the player, which is their unique ID that each account has for Minecraft. Then we have the type of the object that we're trying to lock, which is a chest. And then we have a new object within this object, so it's like a sub-object, I guess you could call it, called location. And inside of that object we have three values, x, y, and z, which is the x, y, z values of the block. And then finally we have the creation date, which is just storing the date of whenever this was created. Okay, very, very simple. So let's see if this works. So all we got to do now is go back to where is it, menu listeners, and just do LockUtils dot create new lock, and then we just got to provide player p and then target, because that's the block that we're trying to lock. Wait, no, not target. What is it? Oh yeah, so this is an issue, right? We can't access the block that we're trying to lock because we don't have an instance of the target from right here, right? We have it in this class, but we don't have that in this class because it just doesn't translate over. It's a totally different class. So an easy way to fix that, I found that is to create an array list, or not an array list, rather a hash map storing the player in the lock temporarily so that we can access it within this class here. And then once we create the lock, we can remove it from that hash map because we're done creating it. Okay. So it's basically just a temporary storage so that we can access the block from any place. So I'll show you how that works. Let's just go to the main class here, and we're just going to make a new object here. This is going to be a public static hash map, and the first value for the hash map is going to be the player and then the block. Okay, and the reason we're storing a player in a block is because we want to, or rather than using an array list, which is only going to store the block or something like that, is because we want to associate each block in this hash map with a player, because there's going to be multiple players. If it's a big server, there's going to be multiple players locking a block at the same time, right? So we need to store which player each block is associated with, basically. Okay, and you'll see how that works in a second. So we need to give this a name now. So locks underscore being created, and there might be a better way of doing this, but this is the way I am doing it for now. So yeah, if you have any other ideas, just let me know. So yeah, basically whenever we create the lock, we want to add the lock to here, basically. So we'll go back. So we just go here and do QuarterMaster YouTube dot locks being created dot put, and now we just provide the player p and then the target. So it's going to put the player and the target block in there. And so now we can go back into menu listeners and do create new lock QuarterMaster YouTube dot get or no, lock's being created dot get, and then provide p as the key. Because if we go back here for a hash map, the first is going to be the key and the second is going to be the value. So we can use the first object to identify the second object basically. So we're providing player to access the block, okay? So since it's providing the player as an object, we know that's going to return the object associated with that player, which is pretty good. That's what we wanted to do. So now all we got to do is, so once it's done creating the lock, we want to remove it from this hash map in case they want to create another lock later on. So just to clean up basically, we can go back into LockUtils and do QuarterMaster YouTube.locksBeingCreated.remove p, just like that, okay? Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully you get what I'm trying to do here. Also, let's add a message here saying p.sendMessage. Would you like to lock this chest? I know the menu is going to be asking that at the top of the menu, but I guess just for, I don't know why, but let's just have that there just to make it look more complete. Anyway, so yeah, we got that so far, and then now whenever the player clicks yes, it should create the new lock for them because we added the functionality in the LockUtils class that's going to create the lock in the database for us. So everything looks complete so far. We just need to test it out now, I believe, right? Yeah, it looks good. So we're going to run this here and see how it works out. I'll see you in the server. Alright, so I'm loading on the server right now so we can begin testing this out. First off, if I look in the console, I can see that everything looks good. It looks like it might have connected to the database. If you see all this, of course, that means that you might have connected. At least it tried to or something. But yeah, let's try testing it out now. Let's try making a lock here. So we're going to make a chest right here, and we'll do /lock. And boom, we get this little menu here. It takes a second for this to load up for some reason sometimes. So we can click no, and then nothing's going to happen, obviously. That's pretty good. Just look in the console. No errors. That's good. So let's try locking it again. Boom. And good. And we click yes now. And this never closes, so we should fix that real quick, actually. So go back here. And when it's done creating the lock, we want to close it, basically. So we'll just go to LockUtils and do p.closeInventory, okay? So that's good. That's just going to clean it up a bit. So yeah, it did say we created the lock down here, so let's check the console. And it does, oh, we have an error here, it looks like. Null pointer exception on menu click Java 20, line 20 on menu listeners. So let's go back to the menu listeners and see if we can find the error. Sometimes this error will happen. It's part of the menu. Of course, the menu sometimes likes to throw null exceptions. That's why I tried to handle it right here. For some reason, it still threw the exception, which is fine. But if we look up here, it says a new lock created. So hopefully it created. That means it worked correctly, hopefully. So let's go back to our database and see if it's in there, right? That's going to be pretty cool if it is. So I'll go back here, go to collections, retrieving list of databases and collections. And come on, load faster.
2 hours later.
Awesome, so finally it has loaded and we can see right off the bat that we have our little document right here. So let's look at it, see what we got here. So we got a UUID, which is the UUID of my account, pretty cool. We got the chest, or the type, we got type chest, which is good. We got the location, and as you can see, if we can open this up here, and we can see that it's a sub-object basically, sub-document as you might call it. And we have the XYZ values of that block that we just messed with, pretty cool, or locked. And then finally we have the creation date, which is the exact date of right now, or whenever the lock was created at least. The formatting could be better, but that's fine. It's just database anyway, so no player is really going to see that. So if we ever show the player the date the lock was created, we might have to parse this or something like that, or however you might do that. So yeah, don't worry about that, but everything was stored successfully, so that's pretty cool. Of course, we also have the object ID, which is a unique ID given to every document within your database or collection, okay? So pretty cool. We got the lock stored. So yeah, what's the next thing that we need to add? Let's think about this, right? So if we go to my other account right here, we can go to where I am, and I can try opening this guy's chest, right? He just locked this chest, right? So I shouldn't be able to open this, but as you can see, I can open this, right? So that's not good. We need to add the functionality so whenever a player tries to open a chest, it's going to also check and see if they own that chest or not before allowing them to open it or not open, okay? So we need to add that part to our code. So I'll go back to our code here and let's try doing that. So we want to basically check and see every time a player opens a chest. Okay, so we're going to make a new listener for that. We're going to call this class Open Chest Listener. That's a fitting name, obviously. So Open Chest Listener, and we want to implement listener. Okay, and this shouldn't be too hard. So we're going to make an event handler here. Public void Open Chest Listener, and then instead of something like chest open event, there's nothing for that exactly. So we're going to do player interact event. And that's going to allow us to do what we need to do, okay? So first we need to think about this. How does a player try to open a chest? Because this is a player interact event. so we can get some information from that. So we could do e.get or e dot, and then we can see all these different methods here. One of the big methods is get action, which is going to return the action that we're interacting with. So this if you don't know, this event here, if we do Control Q, is going to be called every time the player interacts with an object or air. So basically every time they mess with a block, this is going to be called. So we want to check and see first what they did. So how do you open a chest, right? You right click the chest to open it, right? So we need to check and see if the player right clicked an object, right? That makes sense. So e.getAction.equals action, oops, not that, action, and then we have all these actions here, which is pretty cool. We got command key, accelerator key, which I believe is your scroll wheel. You got right click air, physical, left click block, left click air, right click block. So you got all these cool things here, but we want to do right click block because that's exactly how you open a chest. You just right click the block, obviously. So if we know they're right clicking the block, now we want to get the block that they're right clicking, right? Because we want to see if it's a chest or not. Okay, so we'll do block B is equal to .get clicked block. So we want to check and see if that block is equal to a chest or not. So get type dot equals material dot chest. Pretty cool, right? Really simple. So we're just again checking to see what they're doing. If they're right clicking a block, we want to see what block that is, and if it's a chest, then we want to do some further stuff here. So what we want to do at this point, since we know it's a chest they're trying to open, we want to check to see if anyone has locked this chest. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we don't really have a method for that, or we don't have any code that can do that yet, so we would have to make it. But let's go ahead and do that in LockUtils. Let's make a new method that is able to determine whether a player has locked a block or not, right? That'd be pretty cool. We're going to call this public static boolean because it's going to return true or false whether it's locked or not. And we can give this a fitting name for a boolean. It is currently locked. You can see stuff that's commonly like that whenever you work with booleans. So public static is currently locked, and we just need to provide the block that we're checking. So the way we're going to do this is basically by first we're going to use a filter, and we're going to use a filter with the location of this block that we just got passed, and then we could check to see if the location that we're creating in the filter is equal to any of the locations that we have stored in the database. Okay, so let's just go ahead and set our XYZ values. So get X int Y is equal to block.getY, and then int Z is equal to block.getZ. So now that we have these values, we can put this into a document filter. You don't have to call it filter, by the way. It's just a good name to have since it's explaining what's going on here. So what we need to do for a filter is basically just provide the variable or object that we're checking for. So we're going to make a new location object because that's what we have stored. So new location, or no, not new document. There we go. It's a subdocument, right? That's how we did it before. And then now we can just pass in XX append Y, and then append Z, and then Z. Again, if you don't know what the hell I'm doing right now, I'd advise you watch the 2 episodes ago, and then also look inside of the MongoDB Java driver documentation so you can learn how everything works. It's not very complicated. Once you get the hang of it, you're really a code god. I did this in one night, so it's not really that crazy, for me at least. So it might be harder for you, but that's okay. But okay, so now that we have the filter here, we can use this filter to check and see if other documents exist with this current location. So we can do that like we've done before. We could do QuarterMaster YouTube.getDatabaseCollection.find, and that's going to return, if we provide the filter, it's going to return every document that matches that location. But we don't want an instance of the document. We just want to know if that document exists, right? So there's actually a really cool method that's going to allow us to check and see if it exists or not. Or one way to do it at least is to count documents and then provide the filter. So it's going to count every document that matches that filter, so we can just do equals 1. So if there is at least one document that matches the filter, then it's going to be true, obviously, right? And it should only be 1 in the first place because there can only be one block in one location, obviously, right? Unless the block is deleted or something like that. So we got to add that later on, but don't worry about that. So yeah, if it finds the document of that location, that has that location, then we want to then return true because it's currently locked, right? So if it has a location, that means that the document that has that location is a block that's locked, so we want to return true. Otherwise, don't return true, return false, because it has not found a document in the database with that location. So yeah, okay, so it's not locked, right? Perfect, so now we can use the method we just created to check and see whether the block that we're trying to open, the chest that we're trying to open, is locked or not. So we'll just do LockUtils dot is currently locked, B, and we could open that up a little bit. So if it is locked, we want to check and see who locked it so that we can match the name of the player who locked it to the person who's trying to open it. And if they're the same person, then they can open the chest, obviously, right? But if it's not the same person who locked it, then who's opening it, then they should not have access to that chest, right? Because they didn't lock it. It's not theirs, right? So we want to add another if statement, a nested if statement inside of this. And then inside of here, we need to figure out who locked the block, right? So let's just make another method for that. Let's make a method that is able to return an instance of the player who locked that block. So that's going to be useful for us so that we can check and see if it matches the player who's trying to open it and other stuff like that. So yeah, these methods are very helpful. That's pretty cool. So public static player, because we're going to return a player object, get who locked, okay? And then block again. Alright, so how are we going to do this? First, we need to figure out, or let's make a filter first, because we need to find the block that's associated with this, or the document that's associated with this, so we can just copy that part. And now what we want to do is get an instance of the document that matches that location, if it's in the database or not, right? So let's think about how we want to do this. Well, we only need to retrieve one piece of data from the database, which is going to be the UUID of the person who locked it. So we just make a string here, UUID string, is equal to QuarterMaster YouTube.getDatabaseCollection.find, because this time we're not counting how many there are. We're trying to actually get an instance of that document. So we're going to find the filter, and we're going to get the first one that matches it. There should only be one document, like I said anyway, but it's still going to return a document for us. So therefore we can do .get string UUID just like that. So now if that works correctly, it should return that UUID, and then we can make a UUID object, UUID, and to import that, is equal to UUID dot from string UUID string. So now hopefully it's fitting together a little bit. So therefore now we need to return a player, right? Because this is what the method returns. So then we could just do return bucket dot get player, and then you can see if you do Control P, we can provide the UUID or the player's name as a parameter. So UUID, just like that, right? So therefore we're taking the UUID from the document, from this block here, and then we're creating a player from it, basically, okay? So now we're returning that player. If we go back to Open Chest Listener, we can do LockUtils dot get who locked, B for block, and we can see if it's open, and we can see if it's equal to the person who's trying to open the chest, so e.getPlayer, okay? So if it is equal to the person who's trying to open the chest, then we'll just tell them, just for testing purposes really, getPlayer.sendMessage, you own this chest, okay? So that we know it works, right? So else if it's not the same person, then we can just, let's copy this by the way, because I'm lazy. I'm going to put the opposite operator here. So if it's not the same person, what we want to do is do e.setCancelled first of all, which is basically just going to cancel the person from being able to open the chest, right? And then we're going to do e.getPlayer.sendMessage and check color dark red, because we're going to basically give them like an error type thing. And we're going to say this chest is locked by, and let's get an instance of the player's name, so LockUtils dot get who locked b dot get name, okay? Pretty cool. So as you can see here, LockUtils, the methods within LockUtils is helping us out a lot. We don't have to type all this code every time we want to, use it. We can just use the LockUtils methods on one line, right? Pretty cool. Makes our life easier, so that's pretty awesome. So yeah, now that we have this, let's put this tab forward a little bit. We're able to see whether a player owns a lock or not, or chest. And if they own the chest, then that means that they can open it. If they don't own the chest, then they're going to be locked out of it. And yeah, so it's going to add a security feature basically. That's going to be one of the main functionalities of this plugin. It's the purpose, right? Anyway, so let's actually test this out, see if it works. But we actually need to register this class first. So we'll go back down here, bucket.getPluginManager.register events, new Open Chest Listener, this, alright? Hopefully this works, so let's test it out. Okay, so I'm on my server now. So we're going to reload to load the new version of the plugin. Okay, done. So first of all, let's go back to our chest that we just locked a second ago, and let's see if it's still locked. If we right click it, it now says you own this chest, which is pretty cool, right? So now let's get on my other account real quick and go to that location and see if we can open the chest. It should lock us out if it works correctly, right? And boom, it says this chest, if you open this up, it says this chest is locked by Illuminati. So perfect, everything we've done so far works amazingly, and it's all thanks to MongoDB. We're able to store data in the MongoDB server and then retrieve it really, really simply without many lines of code, which is why I want to use MongoDB rather than some other database or YML or stuff like that. Okay, it's just amazing. So yeah, I think I'm pretty much done for now. One thing I want to do actually is just change this. Let's add some color here because it looks kind of ugly. We'll make this chat color dot gray. Okay, gray. But that's all I want to do. That's it for this episode. I showed you a lot of stuff, hopefully. The MongoDB integration was the biggest thing, obviously. And then we added the LockUtils class, which is going to allow us to do a bunch of cool stuff with a few lines of code. And yeah, it's very powerful, as you can see. So hopefully you liked this episode. If you found it to be good, then just let me know. If you didn't like it, if you had any problems with it or issues, just let me know some suggestions on how I can improve it. I'm trying to get better every time I record. Next episode, I'm trying to think of what I want to do, but I want to add a system for where the player can do /QuarterMaster space locks and see all of their locks that they have. Basically, it's going to look in the database and see every lock that the player owns by searching their UID, which is kind of cool. That'll be cool. Let's also make a thing where the player can edit their locks. If they want to delete a lock, it'll open up a lock menu and stuff like that. If they like, for example, I'm trying to figure out how I want to enable that, but I want to make it maybe so that the player can do shift right click and then it opens up the menu for that lock, and then they can manage it, delete it, edit it, and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm just thinking about what I want to do, but if you have any suggestions for me, then join the Discord server and leave suggestions there. I'd be glad if you did that. I would love to hear your suggestions. Don't forget that the code for this plugin is going to be in the description below, so click the link and then bookmark it for future use in case you forget how to do any of this. It's just a good reference for anything. What the fuck is that? I don't really play the new version of Minecraft, so I have no idea what the fuck this is supposed to be. Look like a bunch of freaking serial killers. Anyway, so yeah, also if you want to support this channel, you can click the join button below this video, and you can join this channel as a member for $1, $5, or $10 a month, and you can cancel anytime if you want to. You can do that if you want to, but you don't have to. That's just a way to support the channel if you're interested. And yeah, so if you like this video, leave a like. If you want to see more, subscribe, and peace.